And it now gives me great pleasure to hand the meeting over to Keith, who is going to be sharing on the topic of step 7. So Keith, the floor is yours, and we're happy to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Keith, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks for having me, Liz and Gordon. I know we were texting one another and trying to coordinate a day that worked. I'm from Rockaway Beach, which is a little beach community in New York City, part of the suburbs, the southernmost tip or plain of New York City, right by JFK Airport, if you've ever been. And it's funny because I think Gordon and I met in a meeting I spoke at in India, and then we coordinated with Liz to kind of schedule it. And Liz is in Florida, but it turns out Liz and I came from the same neighborhood in Brooklyn. So she'll be familiar and maybe appreciate my horrible Brooklyn accent. The rest of you, I apologize. It is what it is. But I'm not actually in New York. I'm in Dublin, Ireland right now. You know, the date we picked, it just turned out I was going to be traveling, and with the beauty of Zoom, we could make this all work. So here I am, and thank you for keeping this meeting room open, helping myself and everyone else stay sober, and for allowing me to come in and partake in this meeting tonight. I always like to start out by saying I'm sober today through the grace of God, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And for me, it's very important to say those words, to hear myself say it, and just keep recommitting myself, because that's what the secret sauce is. That's the solution right there. It's God, fellowship, and program. If I have one of those three or two of those three, I don't have the full package. And I can't survive on just one or two of them. I mean, I need all three working in synchronicity with one another for me to be the best version of myself in life, and to be able to handle life on life's terms as it comes at me and stay sober through it all. So it's very important that I say that. The other thing that I always say before I get on a meeting, and I took a moment and I forgot because I was a little nervous. I'm in a hotel in Dublin, and I was downstairs having dinner, and then one of my character defects, and we're going to talk about character defects tonight, is I'm always late. I am late for everything. I didn't want to be late. I don't want to make Liz or Gordon nervous that their speaker wasn't showing up. And I come running up here to the hotel room, and the key won't work in the door, and it's giving me the red blinking light, and I'm stressing out. And I in the course of rushing, what I forgot to do was say the prayer that I always say. So if you were on here earlier, you noticed about a minute before it dawned on me, and I said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And I muted my screen. And I say a prayer that goes just like this, and it's very simple. God, allow me to do your work, to speak your words, and to do no harm. Because I truly believe that what we do in these rooms when we are speaking to other alcoholics is so vitally important, especially for newcomers or people counting days or people coming back or just people who have a long time who are just struggling. You know, like, you can say something that has a positive impact or an adverse impact on somebody. And I just think we have to be very careful. And so I say that little prayer because it settles me down, it quiets me down, and hopefully it lets, my higher power speak through me. In New York, or in the States, I should say, our meetings, we do 20-minute speaking engagements. So you'll have 2 or 3 people speak at a meeting. If it's an open meeting rather, and if it's closed, they'll speak for 20 minutes, and then we'll go around the room. But Liz and Gordon told me that this is a 40-minute speaking commitment. So I feel like I get 2 meetings worth out of just this 1 hour with you folks tonight. I hope I can speak for 40 minutes because I like to keep things simple. Like, I always, I teach at a university, I teach law, and I'm an attorney. And I always tell my students, use as few words as possible. Words kind of clutter things up. So you may notice tonight, I'm going to try to stretch things out a little bit and prolong them, but I'm usually quick, short, to the point. Even when I have to speak for 20 minutes, I tell them I might wrap up in 10. So I'm going to keep my eye on the clock, and I'll try to do my job as best I can. One of the things I mentioned at the start of the hour was fellowship. And, that's such a vital part of this program. And I'm going to get into my story in step 7 in just a moment. But I recently came upon a study that was put out by Harvard and the European Council on Drugs and Alcoholism. And it entailed 10,000 participants, 134 scientists, and 34 different studies. So they studied other studies and conducted their own studies. And the end result, the bottom line from this Harvard and European study was that AA is more effective in treating people in recovery, drugs and alcohol, than any other program, drug, or approach that's out there. Better than psychotherapy, better than psychologists, better than psychiatry, and so forth. Those other things have their place, but in terms of getting sober and staying sober, AA. And the common denominator, the one thing that they rested on and said, this is the reason why, was fellowship, was the communal component of what this program has, and the support that we lend to one another. You know, like Liz tonight started out the meeting saying, is there anybody counting days? We just want to get to know you. When you go into a therapy session, it's one-on-one. It's 50 minutes. That's your hour. It's 50 minutes. And that therapist is watching the clock closely. There's nothing like AA when it comes to the fellowship. But that's just part of the program for me. The steps is another very important part of the program. You have to do the work. And you have to have a faith in a higher power. For me, I'm going to use the word God because that's how I refer to my higher power. It's a God of my choosing through my childhood Roman Catholic upbringing, if you will. And, that's what works for me. So you may hear me refer to higher power or God from time to time. But I just thought I'd share that since I recently read that about the fellowship and how important it is in this study that came out from Harvard. So it's important. And, that's the fellowship. And the program is the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, what we normally see up on the shade on the slide in the room. And I like to talk through analogies because to me, they make sense. Like I said, I like to keep things simple, and an analogy just kind of gets right to the point. Coming into a 12-step program and not participating in the 12 steps is the equivalent of going to a gym, a health club, sitting in the corner for an hour, watching other people work out, watching other people get on the treadmill, leaving the gym and complaining that the gym doesn't work because you're not losing weight. And that's correct. It doesn't work if that's how you participate in the gym. When you come into AA, you have to pick up the weights. You have to get on the treadmill. You've got to go through those steps. And if you're new or just coming back, I would strongly recommend you go through those steps with a sponsor. If you're new or just coming back and you don't have a sponsor, get one. If for no other reason, people will stop hounding you about whether you have a sponsor or not, right? Anytime there's a newcomer, do you have a sponsor? Do you have a sponsor? Do you have a sponsor? We hound them because it's so important to be connected, to be interlinked with somebody else who can take you by the hand, sit down with you in a comfortable, safe setting, walk you through this book and take you through those steps. It is life-changing. Allow yourself to embark on that process and have your life changed. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. We will get to step 7 tonight, believe it or not. But like I said, I got 40 minutes. So it's a long time on my clock. Let me see. I'm up to almost about 8 minutes. So a little bit about my background. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous at a very young age. And I was blessed when I drank. And I was blessed to get this program at a young age. I truly believe that. It was a blessing that was handpicked and handed to me as a gift, a beautiful gift that I got at a young age. And I almost let it slip by. I almost let it slip away. I had about 10 months sober, and I went back out again drinking. I had to go back out and test the waters. And I came back through the grace of God, as I said at the beginning of the hour. Through the grace of God, I came back into AA, and I've stayed ever since. And on the 23rd, the 23rd of this month, in 22 days, 3 weeks, I'll have 28 years sober, God willing. For me, thank you. And for me, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. We see miracles in here every day. I'm just one of many examples of that. So I don't know why I got this program at such a young age. I don't know why my drinking led me to where it led me to at such a young age, but it did. And it took me quite some time to get over that hurdle of acceptance. But once I did, man, did things open up for me in life, and things just clicked and things started to work for me. But it took me some time to get to that acceptance. And that acceptance starts in step one. So a little bit about my drinking. I don't like to do drunkalogs. Quite frankly, I don't like to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. But, after a few years of drinking, and I started drinking at a young age, which is kind of very commonplace in my community then and still to this day. It's a safe neighborhood. We live on a peninsula. It's, you got to take a bridge to get over to Brooklyn. And while I grew up in Brooklyn, I moved to this neighborhood, Rockaway Beach. And it's a peninsula, so it's surrounded by water, and it's kind of an isolated place. And everybody, it's kind of like whatever goes. It's its own little enclave down there. And drinking is one of the things that goes. It's a very Irish community where drinking, I'm Irish, and it is traditionally accepted at a young age, and is quite a bit of rite of passage. So there's no blinking of the eye. Young kids, young adolescents drinking on the beach. And that's the other thing. It's a beach community. So we always had a built-in place to go and drink out of watchful eye of parents, police, and what have you. So like many, I don't think my story is too unique, but like many people in my community, I drank at a young age, started drinking at a young age. And as soon as I started to drink, I chased it. I loved it. After a few years, the things that mattered most to me as a young teenager, which, not to be rude, but at that time was hanging out with my friends, playing sports, and trying to pursue women. That's what the world existed of, and going to school and fulfilling those responsibilities. But those were the big three. Very quickly as a teenager, those three went out the window. I didn't care less about sports. I had college scholarships being dangled in front of me. I could care less. I squandered those opportunities because that meant I had to go to practice. That meant I had to stay in shape. That meant I had to be committed to playing sports in college. And, I was very happy going the middle of the road, bottom of the barrel, whatever came my way, as long as I could drink. I can remember starting high school on a Monday morning, and in the cafeteria, I would be talking about where are we going to go drinking Friday night? What time are we going to get out of school Friday night? How is the party going to start? And I knew right then and there that I was different from other people because they didn't have that obsession of the mind to focus on that the way they wanted to talk about sports. They wanted to talk about what happened last weekend. I didn't care about any of that. I just cared about the next drink, the next high. When was that going to come and how could I get there? And how could I manipulate the world around me to make that happen? Shortly thereafter, I began to experience blackouts, which is a frightening prospect. And I didn't really share it with many people. I was kind of, I don't know, scared is the right word. But it was something new. It was something that had progressed pretty quickly. And it came to the point where I knew by the third or fourth drink of the night, I wasn't going to remember anything. I advanced into college. I did get an athletic scholarship, probably not the one that I deserved or could have gotten had I stayed on the straight and narrow. I played in a tournament my senior year. We flew to New Mexico from New York, and there was college coaches from around the country there. We were playing some of the best talent, and I blew it. I was a starter on the team, and before the first match, I went out drinking with a friend of mine. And the coach benched me the next day. So I got smart. I then took the best player on the team and I took he didn't want to go drinking. He didn't drink at all. He was like Division I college athlete, all the way. We're still in high school at this time. And I figured if I take him with me, the coach is never going to bench him. And therefore I can't be benched. That's that manipulation. That's that alcoholic manipulation at play. So I kind of forced him against his will, me and another guy, to come to the bar with us and drink. And I told him, I don't care if you don't drink or if you don't get drunk, or if you don't even drink, but you're staying out past curfew with us. You're staying in the bar with us. And that's just kind of the way it is. I bullied this kid into doing this. So we come home the next day, that night or the next morning. And again, the coach finds out and I'm benched again. And this kid gets benched, but for like one game. And then he was allowed to play. And, here I am. My whole life, I played sports. I worked for this. I wanted this. And I'm throwing it away to go sneak out at night and drink in dirty old man bars with fake ID for what? For what? To lose my dreams and my hopes and my aspirations in life, and manipulating people around me so that my drinking can take precedence over what their desires and their dreams are as I throw mine away, made no sense. But that's the way I lived my life. So quickly, alcohol took me down a dark road. I got caught drinking and driving one night with a car that I borrowed. If you don't get charged criminally, I guess you can't say it's stolen. It was borrowed. I broke into someone's house one night, not to steal anything they had of value, of real value, other than to take their liquor that I knew was in the liquor cabinet. Like, that's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. So alcohol is changing who I am. I'm blacking out. I'm blacking out. I'm acting out. And I'm starting to now experience the delirium tremors, the DTs, when I try to sober up and I try to stop drinking. And that was very frightening, to be laying in bed and thinking that the branches from the tree were breaking through the glass and reaching in and pulling you out of bed, and birds were flying at your head, and I'm walking around the room ducking and hallucinating. Hallucinating in front of people. It's just a very frightening, embarrassing, humbling, and shameful place to be. And alcohol took me there. I have a lot of bad habits in life. Mint chocolate chip ice cream and pizza, they have never given me the DTs. I've never blacked out. I've never had, as much regret from those things as I have from alcohol. And in the very end, alcohol gave me suicidal ideations. That's never happened from a pint of mint chocolate chip ice cream or a slice of pizza. So something was different, and I knew that. And people around me in my circle started to talk to me. They were starting to buzz. People who I thought were heavy drinkers and partiers and drug addicts were telling me that I had to sober up. I was like, you're telling me, like, look at you. And they were like, no, you should really take a look at yourself. You should see your behavior. You should see who you've turned into. People don't want to be around you. And, that was an eye opener for me. So to prove them wrong, and again, the alcoholic, that mindset, that manipulation, I'll prove you wrong, I'll stop drinking. And, I think I said earlier, I like to use analogies. I have an analogy for how I felt when I tried to stop drinking. If you've ever driven a car in cold weather, frigid temperatures, New York City, you have this thing called black ice, where the moisture in the roadway freezes over. And if you tap the brakes, when you go to tap your brakes and stop, you suddenly realize you have no control over the car. It spins right, it spins left, and you try to pull in the opposite direction, and you just go around and around, and you hit whatever the car wants to hit. You turn whichever way the car wants to turn, and you stop when the car wants to stop. That was my drinking. I decided I was going to stop drinking for a period of time. I was going to prove everybody wrong. And I was on black ice of life. I had no control over my alcohol. It controlled me. It turned me to the right. It turned me to the left. It spun me around. And it decided where I was going to end up, what damage and destruction I was going to cause along the way. And that was an absolutely frightening reality. And look, I can manipulate situations as good as anybody. But one thing I've never done is lie to myself. And when I realized that I had lost control over alcohol, the answer was simple. Do something about it, or go down this dark road and accept the consequences. And I chose to go down that dark road a little bit longer until I smartened up and said, I need help. And I was 12-stepped into this program by my older brother, who was not in the program, but saw the problems that I was facing and how I was living my life. And he had a friend who was in the program. So they sat me down in a diner and talked to me, and I identified with the gentleman who was in the program. And I said, I'll give it a shot. I'll see if it works. And I did for 10 months. And then I went back out for a few months, and it was worse. They say when we're in here getting better, our disease is at the front door doing push-ups with a gorilla on its back. When you go back out there, it's stronger. And There is nothing worse than a head full of AA and a belly full of booze. Once you come in here, any drink you ever have in the future is ruined, so don't even bother picking it up. Because when you have a head full of AA and you're sitting there swigging a bottle, man, you want to talk about paranoia, stress, guilt, remorse, shame. It's on fire. Forget about it. There's nothing good left for me at the bottom of a barrel of a bottle because I've been in these rooms. So, that's my journey. That's how I got here. I'm here. I've been here, as I said, almost 28 years. And let's talk about step 7, which is what we're up to. And I'll just read it very briefly. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So it's kind of funny. Here I am stressing out about talking for 40 minutes. And Liz assigns me the topic that is the shortest step and has the least amount of it in the big book. I think there's 2 sentences in the big book if you consider the second sentence, which gently refers to the sentence above, right? But that's what I got to talk 40 minutes on. But what a vitally important step it is. And I think I shouldn't say, generally speaking, but I can say definitively for me, I overlook it sometimes. I don't practice it consciously as much and as often as I should. And so let's digest this step for a second, right? So humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Like, first, I have to have gone through 1 through 6, and I have to have this concept of God. Like, does God exist? For me, the answer is very simple. Yes, knee-jerk reaction, visceral reaction. Yes, God does exist. The struggle for me was accepting or coming around to the fact that the God of my understanding could help me with sobriety. I didn't grow up with that kind of an image of a God. I didn't grow up with that loving, caring, guiding God. It only occurred if I stayed on the right path, if I did certain things, if I followed certain practices, and I wasn't doing those things. So therefore, I had a punishing God. And it took me a while to take that concept of God and realize that I'm okay how I am, and I can improve, right? What's that saying? Every sinner has a future, every saint has a past. I could change who I am, and I can improve, and I can become a better person. And this step 7 is a tremendous beginning in that journey. So in step 6, well, let's go back even further. So in step 1, we have humility. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. I think to walk into the rooms of AA is a tremendously humbling act. And to look at that step and take that step and read that step and accept it is a tremendously humbling act. To go on this journey is humbling. So humility runs strong through all these steps, but in particular in step 7. So in 4 and 5, so 1, 2, and 3, we have acceptance. I can, he can. So step 3, step out of the way and let him. And I have this relationship with God. In 4 and 5, I look at myself. I look at myself in a way that I've never looked at myself before. And I really do a deep dive, a thorough examination of who I am and what makes me tick. And I see a lot of things there. Some aren't so great. I see how I live on resentment, jealousy, envy, fear, frustration, anger. And what I have to do is get rid of these things, because if I don't get rid of these things, they make me restless, irritable, and discontent. And if an alcoholic, and this alcoholic in particular, is restless, irritable, and discontent, I'm going to drink. I would rather drink than live restless, irritable, and discontent. Today, I don't drink. I don't live that way. I live a beautiful life. And I'll talk about that in where I am today when we get through step 7. So we get through 4 and 5. We do this examination. We share it with someone else. It's a tremendously humbling process. We get through 6. There's really not a whole lot of writing to do in 6, and there's not a whole lot of work. So we kind of skip through 6 and 7 real quick, and we say a prayer, and we move on to 8, because 8 and 9, that's heavy duty stuff. So we think, right? So we do 6 and 7, for me at least, and I don't give it its just due. I don't focus on it as much as I should. And it's a practice I'm trying to embark on in my daily routines. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But, you know, in 6, we become ready to let God take these things away, these defects of character, these shortcomings, as I think the step calls them. In step 7, we ask him, we take action, we actively do something to let him take them away. And that's sometimes where I fail. You know, I pray in general terms. I meditate on a fairly regular basis. I pray daily. But sometimes I don't look at the dirty part of me, the ugly part of me, and say, can you remove that? Can you make me better than I was yesterday? Can you do something about this anger? Can you do something about these shortcomings that I have? You know, I have to look at those on a regular basis. I should look at those on a regular basis, rather, and pray directly on them instead of just doing it in general terms, right? General prayers, ask for your guidance, God, and that's easy. But I should take out that magnifying glass more often and look directly at those shortcomings, because that's how I'm going to sanitize them. That's how I'm going to improve on who I am. If I do 6 and 7 on a more regular, stringent, substantive basis. So, you know, in step 6, it's kind of like in your house, the garbage is full. So you pack it up, you tie the garbage bag, you bring it to the front door. Sometimes you just leave it next to the garbage can. That's not getting the garbage out. That's going to smell the next morning if you don't get rid of it. Step 7 is picking up that bag of garbage, walking it out to the curb, and getting rid of it. It's actively doing something to relieve myself of these shortcomings. Said another way, it's actively doing something to relieve myself of self, to do thy will, not my will. That's what step 7 is all about for me. And, you know, the first word in there is humbly. A lot of people, and this wasn't my experience, but I will say, a lot of people will tell you that the word humbly, as written by Bill W., means get on your knees. And I can only tell you that there are periods in my life where I get down on my knees and I pray. I don't know what it is about the kneecaps hitting the ground. I feel better. I just feel like I don't know if I pray harder or I feel, it just feels different. So I do it from time to time. There are some people who are devout and strict that step 7, you got to get down on your knees and say that prayer. Otherwise it doesn't count. I'm not that much of a strict constructionist, if you will, but I do know that when I humble myself and I get down on my knees and I pray, it feels a little different. There is something about getting on your knees and praying and asking for God's help, asking for his direction, asking for his will, that changes the outcome for me. So how do we, let me check the time. How do we practice step 7? Well, obviously we should be doing it in 10, right? A recycle of all of these steps above. But like I said, I don't directly substantively touch the nerve of step 7 as often and frequently as I should. And that's something that I've been trying to do lately. Identify my defects and say, what am I going to do about this? How am I going to change this, God? And that's the reason I came up to the hotel room tonight early, because being late is one of my defects, and being late is disrespectful, rude, and inconsiderate to everybody else whose time is just as precious as mine. And that's something that I've got to work on. You know, so there's many ways we do it. One is the practice of step 10, 11, and 12 through the practices of steps 10, 11, and 12. And, you know, another analogy, like, so I'm into the sport of boxing, and I've worked with professional fighters on a few occasions. And one of the important questions I always ask a fighter, or find out about a fighter, because they'll lie to you and tell you what you want to hear. I find out from the people around the sport, what does that fighter weigh when they're walking around on their day-to-day journey in between fights? So a kid might weigh, you know, fight at 145 pounds, but after the fight, he might balloon up to 175 pounds. And then the next fight, he shrinks down to 145 pounds, right? So that tells me what his walk around weight is, 175 in between fights. That tells me that that's a fighter that's not doing his work on a day-to-day basis. He's not out running. He's not eating healthy because he's gaining all this weight. And it makes it that much harder for him to lose that weight and get ready for fight night. So I ask myself on a regular basis, what is my spiritual walk around weight? I could be great for an hour in a meeting. I could be great for 45 minutes to an hour in church. How am I the other 23 hours out of the day? How am I when that big plate of food is put in front of me, when somebody cuts me off, by analogy? How am I when things kind of get in the way? When big things happen, traumatic things happen, this alcoholic is on his game. It's happened to me time and time. I've proven it to myself over and over. I recently lost my mother, and I braced myself and I steadied myself, and I was able to get through that because of the things that I've learned about myself and how to live life on life's terms through this program. I had a best friend from childhood, a roommate of mine. He went into his bedroom one night. I had the big book next to my bed. He was a police officer. He had a gun in his drawer next to his bed, and he chose to end his life one night. I got through that. The miracle was not that I didn't drink during those times. The miracle was that I didn't even think about having a drink during those emotional, difficult, traumatic moments in my life. The big things happen. This alcoholic knows how to react. I know what I have to do. It's those little things. It's that pebble in the shoe. It's that guy who cuts me off on the way to work. Now, when somebody cuts me off or they zip around on the shoulder or they're speeding, I just say, I hope whoever they're going to see in the hospital stays alive long enough for them to get there. Maybe that's the journey that they're on at that moment. Who am I to criticize them? But I'm going to get mad. I mean, there was a time in my sobriety where I was not doing that good. I wasn't going to meetings. I wasn't partaking in the fellowship. Somebody cut me off. I jumped out of the car. I ran up to their car. And I cocked my arm back to punch them in the face because they cut me off. As I pulled my arm back, the guy turned. He had to be 85 years old. The shame and embarrassment I felt was just overwhelming. To be on Bay Ridge Avenue, around the corner from where I lived, nearly assaulting an old man because he pulled out in front of me. Horrible. When I stray away from AA, that's my behavior. When I'm on the beam, when I'm doing this work, when I'm engaging in the fellowship, when I'm partaking in my prayer and meditation practices, I smile at the person who cut me off. I give them the room. I say, go where you got to go. I hope you get there safely. I'm just a fundamentally different person. I told you at the beginning, alcohol changed who I am. AA changed me to who I should be and who I can be and who I need to be on a daily basis. So, I use that analogy of the walk around weight. What is my spiritual fitness? Because that tells me how I'm going to react to a given situation on a given day. And if I'm on the beam and I'm doing the work and I'm engaged in the program, I'm going to respond accordingly. I'm going to respond the way God wants me to respond. And things are going to work out the way he wants them to work out because I'm not controlling the show. I'm no longer the chief critic, as the book tells us. Today, I'll tell you a little bit about where we are today. I think I've gone probably 40 minutes, somewhere around, 35 minutes. All right, I'm about 5 minutes to go. All right, I'm getting there. Great. A little bit about my life today. Life is great. I mean, I truly, really mean that. And, because I'm open to the blessings of God's path in my life, that doesn't mean I don't get into arguments. Ask my girlfriend how great I'm doing. She'll tell you, today I was miserable. I was cranky. I was stressed out that I had to get back to the hotel, to get on a meeting at 8 o'clock, and I wanted to get there at 7:30 because I'm always late. You know what I'm saying? Like, these things still pop up. But today I have a shot at life. I have a chance of making things better. I have an opportunity to be a better version tomorrow of myself than I was today. That doesn't happen if I'm not in this program. So things are really great for me today. I'm open to new possibilities and exploring life. I have a sponsee who, when I started working with him, he told me very earnestly, he says, I struggle with spirituality. Not spirituality. He says, I struggle with religion. I struggle with God. And he had a whole packaged head of why it's bollocks and no good. And I said to him, okay, that's fine. Is there a point in your day, in your week, in your month, in your life, where you kind of just felt at peace, at ease. You felt maybe you had some touch with a higher power. And he says, he thought about it. He says, there is. When I'm out on the water, we live right on the Atlantic Ocean. I said, okay, tell me about that. And he says, if I go and I paddleboard out into the water and the sun is beaming down in the water and the water's glistening, he says, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a spiritual experience, but I feel different. That angry conversation I had with my wife back at the house before I left, when I'm out in the water, I'm thinking about going back and apologizing. The frustration I had with the coworkers at work, it's gone. I don't even think about them when I'm out there. I said, this is good. You have a place. You have a beautiful place where you're touching on spirituality. You just probably didn't know it or call it that. So I said, let's go out on the water. I'll meet you there. And he says, beautiful. So he's got 2 kayaks, and he goes out like 10 miles out, like ships going by, like international shipping channels. I told him, slow down, cowboy. We're not going that far out. We're going to go, 100 yards offshore, and we'll watch the sunset or the sunrise, whatever floats your boat, and we'll just talk. And we started to do that. I didn't want to do that. That wasn't how I touched on my spirituality, but I knew that this is how this other alcoholic could touch on his spirituality and come into God's blessing. So I did it. That experience taught me a beautiful thing, to be open to new opportunities. And now today, I own a kayak. I go out in the kayak by myself, and I love it. I get out there before the sun rises, and the water's a sheet of glass, and I feel God's presence like never before. I had 23 years of sobriety, and I never touched upon God's presence in my life like that out on the water. And here's a guy who had 60 days, and he taught me how to go deeper into my own spirituality. So the lesson for me in that is, be open to God's world, be open to all the opportunities that God puts in front of us. And you can learn from everybody in these rooms, whether it's the person who has 1 hour, 1 day, or more years or less years than me. I can always learn and be a part of them. I'll share 2 quick little stories with you, and then I'll wrap it up. A couple of months ago, there was a news article that came across my desk. The phone, you get these text message alerts when there's a breaking story. And it was about a plane crash that crashed in the Midwest. And I thought, wow, that's terrible. And then within 15 minutes, pictures of the plane crash started coming out. And this plane was demolished. They were showing seats broken in half, 50 yards away from the crash site, fire coming out of the plane crash. I said, man, that's terrible. About a half hour later, it took them almost an hour to get into the site where they landed in some remote place. And about a half hour later, another news flash came along that said the commercial carrier confirms 48 people on the plane. About an hour after that, another news flash came across. 48 people survived that plane crash. 48 people. If you saw the pictures of this, the smoldering flames, I got chills sitting at my desk at work looking at that. And I said, there absolutely is a God. And I need to open my eyes, open my heart, open my mind, and be more accepting to see it all around me. And if I do that and I practice that, my life is just great, And anytime things go wrong in my day, I get frustrated, I get aggravated, I get to start my day over. And I can say, God, relieve me of these defects, as step 7 tells us to do. Help me get rid of these shortcomings, this fear, this anxiety, this resentment, this jealousy, this envy, lust, gluttony, greed, whatever it is that's making me off kilter, that's putting me off the beam. If a plane takes off and it calibrates where it has to go, and it's off by 1 degree, just 1 degree, and it's leaving from New York and it's trying to go to London, it might land in Tokyo by 1 degree. Subtle, slow, methodical. Before I even realize that I'm so far out of field, I'm in a different country and I don't even know how I got here. And that's been my experience with my recovery. I've got to stay vigilant. I've got to stay diligent on the beam. I've got to be engaged in the fellowship. I have to remind myself that it's the grace of God, it's the fellowship, and it's this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the steps that have gotten me to where I am today. I'll leave you with this final parting. I'm not much of a cemetery person, but my father was out of town. I forget for what reason, but he was out of town. He was in Florida actually for the winter, and it was Christmas time. And I said, he's going to be real upset. He went to the cemetery every single day for the first year after my mom passed away. She died almost 2 years ago. And he would pack a sandwich, he would go, he'd sit at the cemetery and have a sandwich and then go on about his day. I said, he's going to be real upset if I don't put flowers. He's going to be disappointed. He's not here to put flowers on the grave site. So I'm going to take some flowers. I'm going to go there. I'm not a big cemetery person. It's just not where I connect. But I appreciate that he is. So I go there. I do some planting and put some flowers. I take a picture. I text it to him. And that particular day, I get in my car and I look back at this grave site, and I was upset that day. I was really upset. I don't know why. Missing my mother, who was coming up on the first of the holidays and stuff. And for the first time, I'd been there a bunch of times with him to keep him company. And for the first time, I was probably there alone. And I noticed something. To the grave, the tombstone to the left and the tombstone to the right, at the very bottom, where normally there is no engravements. That's like standard. It's the base and all the engravements are on the stone above. The very bottom to the left, it says, "Rest in peace." Then it's my mother's tombstone. And then it's the other person's tombstone. And it says, "In God's care." As I sat in the car and I looked over and I saw "Rest in peace, in God's care," it just felt like it was a sign to me that, you know what? It's okay. Mom's at peace. She's in God's care. And as I drove away, I had an epiphany. If I do this work and I practice these steps on a regular basis, I too, on earth, get to live in God's care. And that's a beautiful day if you take advantage of it. I want to thank this group for having me in here. I want to thank Liz and Gordon for running this room and allowing me to speak tonight. And as I said at the beginning, I hope I spoke the right words and did the right acts. And most importantly, I hope I did no harm. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Keith. Thank you for having me.